Hi everyone, my name is Karen and thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today is another big day for the channel. After a few months, maybe weeks, but definitely months, we are finally back with an author interview. Today I'm excited to introduce Reuven Fenton, a journalist and the author of the newly published Goyhood. This is a debut novel, which is a funny exploration of faith and brotherhood and also everyone's favorite topic, a man experiencing a midlife crisis. Thank you so much for coming onto the channel. I'm really excited to be chatting with you, but to kick it off, I actually want to go back in time a little bit and would love to hear from you. When did you realize you were an author?
Well, it really depends on how you look at it. But when I was a kid, I was one of those kids prone to have that inclination to write stories. And I remember, in third grade, writing a story with my friend and being really into it. And of course, when you're in third grade, the narrative just takes no direction. It just it kind of goes as your imagination carries. It doesn't have any of the parameters that you have to deal with when you're going to this professionally. There's no 3-act structure when you're a kid, which is part of the fun of the whole thing. But I was hooked with the whole thing, and just always being a big reader.
Mm-hmm.
I think certain people are just inclined to these things. So I know lots of people who don't read at all, just because that's not their inclination. Why do we have these kinds of inclinations? I mean, is it genetic? I mean, who can really say? But the bottom line is, in college, I majored in English because, again, I mean, this was, and when I was in elementary school and then later high school, I was a terrible student. The only grades I got, my only good grades were in English. And so, it's a funny thing, like why we're inclined to such things. But then the actual writing of the novel itself, that's a whole process that's so far beyond hobbying or having fun. I wouldn't call the process fun anymore, but somehow there was this drive to get this done somehow, to make this happen. It just seemed like sort of the ultimate goal for somebody who's inclined towards doing something creative.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because growing up, I was also a big reader and my parents really instilled that into us. But now as like adults, because I have a younger sister, I have still like kept up that habit clearly with this channel. And my sister is like, just reads like a book a year or something like that. And I just think it's interesting to say how that does shape who we are.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned you studied English in undergrad, and then from there you somehow found yourself a journalist. How did that pivot happen?
It's funny. So it's like when you're inclined towards these things, you have to look at the practical side of life. And I know lots of people, let's say, who majored in English or philosophy or another one of these disciplines with it that's not so conducive towards careers. A lot of them just end up, going into business or whatever it is they end up doing. But to me, journalism seemed like a good compromise because it does have that whole. To me, it's in that general category of reading and writing. And of course, dealing with real world events, but it's a good compromise, I think, for people who are creatively inclined and who are into reading and writing. And in fact, there are many journalists who would love to write novels, and many who have written novels, and if not novels, nonfiction works. But the bottom line is that urge. I believe that many a journalist is secretly, a creative writer who needed to make a living. So that's sort of how I ended up doing it.
For sure, that makes sense. And did you find that your work as a journalist, did that help or hinder the creation of Goyhood?
It totally helped, and it helped in a number of ways. One of them being, so I mean, my employer is the New York Post, which anybody who reads the New York Post, it's like it's famously very readable. And writing in this, I don't want to call it simplified way, but a readable way where you kind of minimize commas and you jump through all kinds of hoops to make your writing as readable as it possibly can be. That totally went into the writing of Goyhood. I mean, I was it almost sounds like an oxymoron, but I was fastidiously simple in the writing of the book, which is actually quite laborious, believe it or not. Like going for simplicity is actually a tough challenge in and of itself. You want to just kind of write in this, I don't know, kind of esoteric, as at the level your brain is at, but I'm really trying to please the reader. That reader pleasing is a New York Post state of mind that I took into the writing of Goyhood. And then also just, I've been a reporter a long, long time, and I've accumulated this like pretty extensive, just general knowledge of various topics, just from living and from working. And New York City, I know the city back and forth, and so I think I was able to just incorporate all these facts that are in my head and ideas and things like that into the story to make the story more visceral and believable, because I'm constantly referencing things that are part of real life.
So this idea of having the book be incredible, readable, which is inspired by a lot of the work that you do on the day-to-day, was that something that you thought of from the jump, like in the first draft, or did that come later after like a couple of revisions?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, now you're getting into my process, but the process is really, the whole thing with me. I do multiple drafts. The first draft is just really just an accumulation of words that I like the metaphor of just thinking of it like when you're building a sandcastle, let's say, and you ever seen those intricately designed sandcastles with the turrets and everything like that. But you just start with this mountain of sand. And then gradually you're removing sand and adding new sand. So the original, the first, what you call a first draft, what people call, is to me just an accumulation of words that just has the most basic shape of what I'm going for. And then I just kind of carve at it and I throw out just huge amounts of material. So getting into like the writing style itself, like that comes like in later drafts already. Like I'm like, okay, once I've got my story straight, basic shape of what I want, then I can start getting into like, okay, I want to make this readable. I want to eliminate commas and do anything I can to make the thing more readable. But that's more of the fine tuning that comes later.
And then had you tried writing a novel before Goyhood? Were there other attempts?
Oh yes, when I think of writing Goyhood, I really consider it the writing of two novels. There was a previous novel that took a long time. It was something completely different. It was like a young adult sort of what they call an urban fantasy, which is like for people who don't know, it's just basically it takes place in the real world, but it involves like supernatural type events. It was kind of a superhero type of deal. I put everything I had into it, really, like the same amount of effort that went into Goyhood went into that novel, but I was unable to get literary representation. So the thing ended up never being published. And a lot of that had to do with so a lot of agents, when I pitched it out, were interested in seeing the manuscript. So I sent it to them, and they almost all had the same complaint, which had to do with this issue with the way the book was structured and the way it starts out one way and it turns in tonally, it completely changes, and they didn't like that. So, but I mean, the lessons that came out of that rejection, I took and carried that momentum into the writing of Goyhood. So really, Goyhood is the culmination of the process started with the writing of that first novel for me, totally. And I'm sure this is something that, by the way, like I'm not the only author who has had this kind of experience.
No, definitely. I think that makes a lot of sense, that it's kind of like everything prior to the release of Goyhood was like a preparation for this.
Completely. Yes. Right.
And so for those of you who don't know, because the book just recently came out, Goyhood is the story of a man, Marty, who finds out like early 40s that his whole entire life is kind of predicated on a lie. He actually is not a Jewish man. And so he gets back together with his brother, and they kind of have a bit of an adventure, and he's figuring himself out. So I wanted to hear from you. How did the story of Marty and his brother come to you? Did you see like a scene first in your head? Was it like a very image-based thing, or did you maybe hear a line? Like, what was the inspiration, like that first kernel that came to you?
Right. So the short answer, the very quick answer to your question is I don't know.
We don't want the quick answer. We want the
long. No. So the thing is, I'm proceeding with I don't know. The longer answer is that like you start with this what if scenario in your head, like, which I'm constantly coming up with these what if ideas. Like, wouldn't it be wild if A, B, and C happen? And then that'll be a cool idea for a novel. Okay, so I decided to run with this one. So like I start out with my character in what I perceive as like the beginning of the story. He's like right before the crisis happens. That's where I want to start. I kind of have that sense. And then I'm okay. So here's his life before, and now what happens? And then like there's that what they call seat of your pants style writing. Okay, so well, he starts his life and he's in this yeshiva in Brooklyn now, and then he's going to find out somehow. Well, how is he going to find out? Well, he gets a phone call. Okay, well, and who's going to call? Well, it's his brother. Okay, well, I don't know anything about his brother yet, but I just know that he's got a brother who's calling him to let him know some news, which is going to ultimately lead to the big news which is the central crisis of the book. And then so okay, well, he's got a brother. So how does he going to find? Well, their mother died. Okay, that's what sort of sparks the crisis. Oh, well, their mother died. That means he's got to fly home and deal with the funeral. So now he's going to meet up with his brother. Well, and then right away, like the thing is expanding in my head as I'm writing. Now he's got a brother. Okay, so what's the deal with his brother? Well, like let's make his brother be completely different than he is, so we can have like two contrasting characters, and that'll maybe set something tonally, some kind of tension, because you're always looking for tension when you're in writing. Okay, and then like just this progression, like now the brothers are together, the crisis hits, and I still hadn't figured out how I was going to make the crisis hit, but I had this idea. Okay, well, the mother writes this posthumous letter that explains everything, and now what? Okay, and then so it's this logical progression, which again over the series of drafts, I have the story go this direction. I don't like it. I throw that whole part out, and then I try having it go this direction, and I like that a lot better. And so very organically, but like painfully, really. I'm trying out like a story and seeing where it goes, and ultimately, like as I'm getting, writers talk about getting to know their characters, as I'm getting to know these guys and understand their motivations and their drives and their personalities and their histories. Ultimately, we end up having what I have here with these two brothers that are polar opposites, but ultimately, through the course of a transformation, which is essential for every story, your protagonist has to transform. They end up kind of settling their differences and finding how much they have in common.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like it makes a lot of sense. Like this continual asking of like, what if, and can we raise the stakes?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems as if with each draft, like things were changing, maybe very drastically at times. Were you also showing this drafts to people, or was this very like internal, like focused, just you?
It's a good question, because I read a lot about writers, and like I get Writer's Digest, which is a good magazine if you're into learning to write. And so many writers, like I would say more do than don't, seem to like to be involved with communities where they show each other their work. And that's not me at all. I'm so internal, and I'm into like not showing anybody anything until I have a manuscript that's just about as perfect as I can make it. And even then, I gotta be honest, like I only showed this before I pitched out to literary agents. I just showed it to my brother to have him take a look at it, because I just for me, and getting back to personality, I think this is just a personality. Maybe it's a flaw, maybe it's a personality flaw of mine, but essentially I don't like even people to know what I'm working on, or even that I'm necessarily working on. You're the same thing. Yeah, because and why is that? I don't know. Like maybe there's a little ego involved, and also just like the idea of having people see something that's like completely creative that you made, that's totally personal, very very daunting to me to show something off like that.
It definitely requires a lot of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found though that with the publication of it, has that made you feel nervous, or like, are you okay with it, or like are you like not thinking about it? Like what's happening?
No, I've come to I gradually, so like it's been a process, because the book was accepted by a publisher. It was in January of 2023 when we so it's like there's been this very slow build up. It was just released last week, actually, finally, and like over the course of this, what's a year and a half already, I'm mentally undergoing a transformation of my own, where at this point I'm pretty comfortable with I'm actually more than comfortable. I want everybody to know, because I actually want people to buy it. And so, you know, there've been reviews, and now it's all over the web and places like that. And people are reading it and buying it, and Amazon and various booksellers. And now I'm in that whole other mode. I've shifted now from being this introvert now to what you have to do, which is an extrovert, and I'm fairly comfortable with the process.
Definitely. Going back to the book, so when we meet Marty, his life seems kind of perfect. He never has to worry about money.
Mhm.
His father-in-law has taken care of that. His wife is, you use a term that I forget what it is right now, but like she's able to manage everything for him. Like she's on top of stuff.
Ballabuster.
Yeah, yeah. And in return, he gets to study religious texts, and he feels like his life is perfect. He has no questioning that's going on, which I find interesting. It's not internal forces don't require him to change. It's actually some very big external things. And in that regards, I thought this midlife crisis seemed a little unusual because my understanding is that these things generally happen from like very internally focused. And I wanted to know like what inspired you to write about a man at this point in his life who seems like everything is like good.
I mean, maybe it has something to do with the ages that I'm at right now. I'm around the same age as these brothers. That actually is definitely a big part of it. I mean, because I'm kind of writing from my perspective, like if I were the main character, how would I be reacting? And you know, no, but I mean, you know, at my, you know, when you're my age, you're hopefully like pretty established in life and settled. I mean, not everybody is, but many people by the time you reach my age, you're hopefully, you know, kind of settled down and secure in your life, which is where he's at right now. So this is like the last time, the like the last point in your life when you want to all of a sudden experience this existential crisis, which just upends everything. So again, you know, when you're writing and you're looking into, you know, well, how can I maximize the conflict, the tension? If I had made him, you know, a 20-something-year-old, that would have been a whole different type of book. He's still young, and he has, you know, his whole life ahead of him, and maybe he's not married yet or anything like that, and he's not dealing. I mean, like my character is so anchored in this world that he's built for himself, as you say, right, where he really doesn't. His entire life revolves around the study of religious texts. And there are problems in his life, but there are problems that he can kind of willfully ignore. Problems with his wife, but ones that he can kind of get around and generally be happy and content with the way things are. But I think maybe that's a big theme of the book is, you know, contentedness is maybe not the best choice for people. Maybe not the purpose of life is not to be content, but to actually participate with the world and be involved and deal with crises and change. He's resistant to change. And the crisis forces him to change, and which is really, I think that what propels the story forward.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think it's interesting also that how his resistance to change also then affects his like thoughts on God completely. Like he really feels the rug has been taken away from him. I don't know. That's not the correct saying, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, you're yeah, exactly. It's well, the whole idea is that, like, you know, from his perspective, not to get too you know, theological, like philosophical, but essentially, like he's been acquiring like points essentially through, you know, because the, you know, in Jewish belief, not all Jewish belief, but his Jewish belief is that by you know, studying the Torah all day and all night, and, you know, like he's acquiring what will essentially prepare him for the afterlife. His goal is the afterlife. He's fixated on this idea that the more Torah he studies, the better, like, quote unquote, you know, seat he'll get a closer seat to God, so to speak, when he dies. He's preparing for after death, which is a arguably unwise way to live your life. Although, I mean, like, you know, many Jews do actually, we know, very strongly believe that the whole purpose of life is to prepare for the afterlife. But then there's a whole side of Judaism that's like, no, it's about what we can do here on earth in terms of, participating in the world and doing good things for other people, and really being involved in other people's lives, and not for our own fulfillment and our own preparation for the afterlife. So I think I kind of lost the thread of what the question was, but essentially, and then he finds out that he's been collecting, as I call it, monopoly money, because none of it was real, and it's a fast for me, as a Jew, or really any person of faith. I mean, imagine if you believed when you were praying that you were actually like communicating with God, like and then you find it, and so matters of faith, you believe, and then to find out that it wasn't true. So what does it say about belief?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what one of the concepts that fascinated me the most in exploring this topic.
No, definitely. I think that makes a lot of sense, because I also think what's interesting about the character of Marty is that he grows up with the first 10, 13 years of his life not religious at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then he becomes incredibly religious. And I think it's the religion that you grow up with, or even if you're not particularly religious as a child, those messages that you receive do really color how you see the world. And now that Marty has found out that he is not actually Jewish, he still can't help himself from viewing the world through a very Jewish lens.
Exactly.
That is insanely how he's perceiving everything in all of his interactions.
Yeah, I mean, completely. And what's notable, the title book being Goyhood, and for those who know, Goy is just sort of a term for a Gentile, a non-Jew. So, and he's going through Goyhood. He's experiencing life as a Gentile, but his perception of what a Gentile is, because he doesn't know from Gentile, his entire adult life is revolved around Jews and this kind of cloistered life that he lives. His perception of what a Gentile is very generalized, and it's built around, as a youth, he kind of grew up in this, let's say, kind of like a neighborhood that not the best neighborhood, and his mother was really not a great mother, and the kinds of men that would come over to visit his mother were not savory characters at all. So his perception of what a Gentile is not necessarily like an professional, educated, like many people in the world are, but this sort of gritty, I want to say low class type of individual. And so, he's kind of going around now as a Gentile himself. He's like, oh, so he now he thinks low of himself.
Yeah.
He thinks he's one of these sort of unsavory characters of the sort that he's been, he dealt with as a kid coming, in his neighborhood. He doesn't realize that somebody who's not Jewish can also be a president. I don't know, a doctor, whatever it may be, somebody of great import.
For sure. And I think you live in the New York area. Marty, at the beginning of the book, is in New York, but he does not stay in New York. And I was wondering why you decided to not write about New York.
Yeah. I was on the fence about writing about New York. I felt that if I left him in New York, then the crisis would have to be with how he deals with his community, with having this secret, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been sort of the obvious choice of how to proceed with the story. Now, if I were to have done that, I wasn't going to create drama where that wouldn't pertain to real life. And I believe that his community, if let's say he'd come clean and told everyone, listen, I'm, he would not be ostracized. He'd be like nobody would. The thing about finding out that, you're actually not really a Jew when you thought you were, this has actually happened in real life to people. And the resolution is not a difficult one. I mean, because you already have all the knowledge. I mean, you get a conversion, and it's really logistically speaking, not a big deal. I don't see anybody in his community giving him a hard time because he's kicking him out, let's say, expel, oh, you're not Jewish, get out of here. That would never happen. But because it's a novel and because I have to create tension, I would feel like I'm under pressure to make his community do that to him for novelistic purposes. And that wouldn't be true. And then I wouldn't be being fair to people in real life. I'd be misrepresenting them. So I decided, okay, well, I got to move him out of here and let this be an internal crisis, because the logistical solution isn't the issue here. The issue is, coming to terms with this, in an existential sense, but also, but then there's also are some logistical problems having pertaining to his wife
Yeah.
and her whole modus operandi and his father-in-law. So I do create some issues there, but I'm not going to misrepresent the whole community by having them kick him out or something like that, when that's not what would happen in real life.
No, definitely. I think that makes sense. And I also think, as you're saying, the real tension wouldn't be with the community. It's actually entirely with Marty, and it's very like self-fabricated in that capacity, because he does have a very like over the top reaction. Like he is freaking out.
Yeah, he does. And not everybody would freak out. I actually asked I have a brother who's a rabbi who's deeply Orthodox, and I said, like, what would you do this happen to you? And he said I would, essentially he would just deal with it. Like it wouldn't, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, and I think that is probably true of a lot of people, but because of Marty / Mayer, his whole worldview and his whole history, that opens up a whole set of doors that wouldn't necessarily pertain to just anyone this happened to.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then kind of going back to, you decided to take the book out of New York, and Marty and his brother David, they embark on a road trip through the South. And that is very, I think, like quintessential American, to just hop into a car and have a road trip. And I think that decision also helps like propel the novel forward, because they're being put into different situations. They come across a three-legged dog, and then they are dealing with some unsavory characters like the racist firework man. And I wanted to know, what was it about the South and driving that drew your attention?
So it's, again, short answer, I don't know. Long answer is, I remember working on the story, and early on, I have his brother give him a phone call early in the book, and in the first draft, let him know that their mother had died. And I was like, well, where does the brother live? And I was like, Georgia. Okay. Like, let's have him be from Georgia. But why? I can't for the life of me recall why I picked that particular state. I really cannot remember how I decided. Was it arbitrary? Was it divine inspiration? I don't know. But I think choosing the state of Georgia set the whole thing in motion, that like this road trip, well, he's going to fly there. Okay. And then what happens? Well, then they decide to go on a road trip, but they're leaving from Georgia. So, and their general direction is back to New York. But then events, because I'm writing this by the seat of my pants, and one thing is happening after the next, they're ending up going through the deep South. So that's how, and then that opens up all this narrative. Okay, Springer Mountain, the Appalachian Trail, there's a whole segment of the book that takes place there. All these things stem from what in hindsight seems like just an arbitrary decision to choose Georgia as his home state. Which is, really kind of interesting. These impulsive decisions we make as writers can just have incredible consequences. The entire book is written, the entire plot is sparked by the decision to set it in a certain place for no particular reason that I can recall. It's interesting, right?
Have you been to Georgia before?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I've been to all the states that
that
they go to in the book, and maybe that had something to do with it, but. Maybe I needed it to not be too far from New York, in the sense that you could drive it. Whereas if I'd set the book in, New Mexico, let's say someplace like that, you could feasibly do it, but there'd be too much driving. Yeah, something like that. But these weren't necessarily conscious thoughts. I think it was just like, a lot of times you just kind of go with what's logistically best for you.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to know, well, this is kind of a two-part question. The first part is, while you were writing the book, were there any other books that you were reading that were kind of in the back of your mind?
Yeah, well, so I'm always reading that, and that's highly recommended for those for those who want to be writers. You really need to read novels all the time. I actually like to listen to them on audiobook. And the reason I do that is because it's a time saver. Like, I do a lot of driving for my job, and I also go running every day and do things like that. So I listen to audiobooks a lot, and I actually get more reading done that way than by actually sitting down with the book. It's a great way to save time.
What speed are you listening at?
What's that?
What speed are you listening at?
So I would say more, usually it's a number one, regular speed. I will speed it up sometimes, depending on the narrator. If they're going a little slow, I might speed up to 1.25. for a while, like years ago, I was going as fast as like double speed, which like I remember I read Atlas Shrugged, which is a really long book.
Yeah.
Listened to it, but I listened to it at a much longer speed, faster speed, I mean. But usually, well, what speed do you like?
Well, I do find that audiobook narrators tend to speak very like, slow and there's long
Mhm.
pauses. So I normally do like 1.5. And then once I'm like really in the story, then I'll
Mhm.
like bump it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it depends on the narrator. There's certain narrators I love. Like I'll just listen to the book because I love the narrator so much. Like there's this one Scott Brick. I'll listen to any Scott Brick narrated book because I love him. But to getting back to so I'm always listening and I read like all across all kinds of genres. But there was one the one that comes to mind that inspired some of the writing of Goyhood was this author James Lee Burke, who actually his books do take place in the New Orleans area,
Hmm.
and but he's really into describing the flora and the fauna and the scenery around the character, and that was definitely inspiration for mentioning all the different kinds of trees that and plants that I mentioned in the book. That was totally inspired by him. So so James Lee Burke for that type of thing. Although otherwise his books don't, his books are very moody and dark and don't resemble Goyhood at all. But then I'm sure I picked other, there's this series of books that I love that I've actually read multiple times. I call it the Sideways series. There was a movie called Sideways that came out in 2004 or no 2006 maybe, and it's basically about these two guys that go driving through wine country in California,
Mhm.
and I've read them multiple times because I love those books for some reason. Um, and those were definitely inspired. That whole kind of road trip narrative
Yeah,
had to have been inspired by the Sideways books. So yeah, I mean, I think you pick up all kinds of little things that you from what you read. You sometimes you're not even conscious of them. You know.
definitely. And I think the second part of that question is there's something really cinematic about Goyhood, I thought. It's like very visual in that capacity. And I was wondering, I know you did just mention Sideways, that like film book situation. Were there any movies that you were watching or thinking about as well?
Hmm. Um, Not specific. I mean, there probably were, but I probably had like consciously or not. I mean, there's a lot of road trip movies out there, and I've seen a bunch
Mhm.
of them. And there had to have been, something out. Like I think probably like something about having the soundtrack of the book. There's a lot of classic rock. I probably in the back of my mind had Easy Rider somewhere in there, but movies not so much. Although funny you mentioned the whole cinematic aspect because I think that for me, getting back to our original discussion about the readability, about making what I was saying about making it
Mhm.
readable, and kind of inspired by the New York Post. Like I think that a book, like my favorite books are of the cinematic type, where you kind of hopefully will forget that you're reading and feel like you're watching a movie, but like a long movie that you really get into, and don't really want to end. So that was something that I intuitively went for, making it cinematic, making it visceral, very very readable, very fast paced, and and so yeah, a lot of people have mentioned me like that said the book is cinematic. They said, well, are you trying to option it for a movie? I mean, sure, we're trying. My agent's trying, but I mean, like that's something like a lot of people told me like this could be, this would be easily rewritten for a movie.
Yeah, definitely. Well, good luck with that. Um, and so, my final kind of question about the book is if you could use 3 words to describe Goyhood,
Uh-huh.
what would they be?
3 words. Okay. Well, so I'm on the spot, so I'm gonna
I know.
choose.
I should have sent you that beforehand.
Yeah, no. I'm going to choose three as the continue. I mean, fun is one word. If I have to rank them, I mean, I hate to say fun would be my first choice, but I really did go for fun. That's
Mhm.
number one. Number two, um, you know, I want to say philosophical. Philosophical and fun don't usually go together, but I think that the part of the fun is to, the philosophical balances out the fun, and the fun balances out the philosophical. So you kind of get both. You get your dose of philosophy without it being painful, because it goes down with so much sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Fun. And then a third, and you're asking me, like, what word to describe the book. Is that, what it is? Heartfelt, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's a lot of emotion in the book, and there's a lot of moments that wouldn't necessarily make you cry, but would definitely make you laugh. And a few people have teared up at the end of the book. They told me that. So there's a lot of feeling in the story that I went for, that it came from a very personal place. So fun, philosophical, and emotional. Heartfelt.
I think that's a good one, because I also think so where we're getting this perspective through Marty, who's very like by the books and is like very esoteric. He spends most of his time thinking, and he's not really like centered in his heart. But then when you see David, his brother, and the clear like emotions that David has, and David's desire to like reconnect with his brother, and I found that to be really touching, especially as one considers that siblings are some of the longest relationships you're going to have in life.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked seeing like them trying to reconnect, and especially like David's strong desire to, gain his brother's respect and love.
Yeah. And again, I mean, there's that contrast between the two of them. I mean, Marty is this, as you say, by the book, kind of black and white character, and then David is this just full of kind of hedonistic, pleasure seeker, who's just full of life and full of emotion, and the way they kind of play off each other and change each other. So by the end of the book, Marty has attained so much more color than he had in the original, and then David, who's reaching a point in his life where he wants to get serious, needs his brother to help him get serious about life, because he's had all the fun that he really wants to have and wants to take life more seriously. So you have like them playing off each other, and essentially, I mean, again, not to get too philosophical, but the two brothers, in a way, pertain to the one self. They complete each other and form, a sort of imperfect but perfect human being.
Yeah.
You have this whole kind of like animal side, which is represented by David, and this kind of spiritual, holy side represented by Mayor and Marty, and the two combined create, a person.
Definitely. And then kind of we're wrapping up, but I would love to know, since summer is here, a little bit about your summer reads. Everyone who's listening should obviously read Goyhood, but and I'd love to show off the copy.
Well, hold on, of course, that's right. Actually, I don't know if you in the hard copy, there's a little surprise on the little dog right here.
Oh, so that's cute.
Yes, nice. The dog his name is Popeye. He plays a major role in the story. He's their companion. My summer reads. Well, let's see, because I'm not. So right now I'm in the middle of. I usually don't plan in advance, but I'm listening to, I'm reading / listening to the books that there's a series that the Silence of the Lambs was.
Yeah.
So the Thomas Harris books. I'm reading them out of order, but I'm reading the first one now, which is called Red Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, what else am I? It's just like I don't really plan. I'm actually looking at my.
Are you a mood reader?
If I am, it's like not something I'm that conscious of, in the sense of like I'm not thinking I'm in the mood for this. Maybe some other time. I'm just thinking yes or no usually. But so we'll see. I mean, sometimes I'm in the mood. Yeah, so I guess I am a mood reader. Sometimes I'm in the mood for kind of lowbrow, like a thriller type stories. And then I shouldn't call them lowbrow. I mean, but sometimes I get into like a Stephen King kick, but then I'll get to something like, this Kristen Hanna books I can get really into. And again, I do love those James Lee Burke books. So sometimes like those are a little more dark. I don't know. It's like does do the seasons have anything to do with my taste? I wonder about that. I don't believe they do, but I could be wrong.
I think that for me, actually, like the seasons do slightly affect things. Like in the summertime when it's quite hot, I actually end up reading books that take place in winter, like as a way to cool down almost.
Oh yeah. That's a very good point, because I remember I used to watch the show in the wintertime. I would watch Dexter, which is not on anymore. But I love, but the whole aspect of being in Miami really, I was really into it. Made me want to be there in the wintertime because I go these dismal New York winters.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like I know that traditionally, like, summer reads, I think they usually take place in kind of warmer climates. I think. No, but I totally hear you about the. I mean, I'm a summer guy, so I love just warm weather, anything.
Yeah.
But I hear you on that because it's like what are you craving? You're craving cool weather, so you're going to read about cool weather. And I do love books about Arctic exploration too. But I don't know if I read those in the summer necessarily. But no, but I think that yes, probably in the winter I do go for lighter stuff. I bet because I crave a little bit of reprieve from the in the steely gray color schemes outside.
Definitely. I actually just remembered this one question that I wanted to ask earlier. You mentioned that with Goyhood, the readability was really important to you. And I wonder if, well, two-part question. One, are you thinking about your next book? Two, are you going to maintain like that similar readable style, or is that something that you want to like try something else?
Yeah. So the answers to both questions are yes. So I'm a chunk of the way through this new novel, which is I'm in like my second or third draft. I would say my third draft. But again, my drafts, it takes so long before I'm really even prepared to call it like a proper draft. But that being said, yeah, I have a draft of a novel that I'm a new novel, which and I have this whole policy, but I never speak about, as you know, what I'm working on. It's hard to even admit I'm working on a new novel.
Yeah.
That being said, but the readability, I mean, I just think it's so important. Because it's like I don't write for me. I'm writing for the readers. I mean, ultimately, what's satisfying to me is knowing that they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I just think, like, come on, like don't like really cater to them, please them. I'm a people pleaser by nature. And I want my readers to be happy, and I want them, and I want to see that reaction where they just like they can fly through it and not get hung up on any particular part. I want like every moment just to fly by, and for the experience to truly be a pleasure, and to get that pleasure. It's like to get that pleasure from people. I want you need to make the thing just where you forget that you're reading. That's my thing. I'm not, I'm not a literary writer. I'm not an experimental writer. And kudos to those people. And like those are the Pulitzer works that and or the Nobel Prize for fiction type of writers that I'll never be, but I'm okay with that. I mean, that's because again, I'm into making the reader happy.
And that's admirable.
Thank you.
Okay, and so where can the people find you, hear from you? Everyone, the book is available in all bookstores. Yes,
it's available in all bookstores, and so whatever. I mean, I would say the majority of people seem to buy the books on Amazon nowadays. That's great. Buy it there. Go to Barnes and Noble. Go to it's in a million, not a million. It's in quite a few like regular independent bookstores as well. I've asked if that's your preferred way to buy things, and just Google my name. Google Reuven Fenton Goyhood, and you'll see like there's quite a lot of reviews, there's lots to read about the book. There's just on the web. I've gotten reviews in the Associated Press, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Forward, and so there's a lot to read about the book if you just check out Google results on Goyhood, Reuven Fenton. Just make sure at this point I think it's still best to put Goyhood in quotation marks because there's that movie Boyhood with a B, and the Google wants to sometimes show results for Boyhood. So make sure that hopefully ultimately Goyhood will be popular enough that it doesn't need the quotation marks, but be on the safe side. Check it out.
Cool. Thank you.
I'm on all the social media. Sorry,
that's okay.
Twitter, X and Instagram is probably my favorite. Place. Yeah.
Okay, great. So everyone, Reuven Fenton, Goyhood, in quotation marks, but not for long. And thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you, Karen. It's been a real pleasure.